lost a tribal member like about 2.5 weeks ago due to cancer. We did this walk on May the 13th. We did a spiritual walk from our community to the White Mesa Mill. And this individual, elderly lady that was with us at the time, had attended the walk with us. So now, it's really heartbreaking to hear, our tribal members there in White Mesa have health issues. All our young youth have asthma problems, diabetes. Our tribe is trying so hard to do the air quality. They do a lot of testing on our water. Because not too long ago, the community had brought a piece of paper, went door to door, stating that we had to literally boil our water for a couple of weeks. They didn't tell us why. They didn't give us no information. And probably like about a week and a half, they finally, told us, came back and said, the water system is fine. You can go ahead and use the water. But our community there in White Mesa, we don't drink our tap water. The community goes out and buy cases and cases of bottle of water to drink. But we utilize the water for like cooking, laundry, showering, and that's about it. But other than that, we try our best, and we have we have CLE, No Hall, we have Green Action that comes out and helps us, helps us out with trying to help us stop the mill to where they will not be hauling any more stuff into the mill because we're downhill, we're downdrift from the mill. And we recently had a meeting in Blanding, and a lot of the Blanding community members are for the mill. They want it to continue just because of employment. But our reservation is saying no, because these people had promised, the company had promised our reservation that our tribe is going to be the first ones to be hired. But when our people get hired, they only work there for a month and a half, then they release them. They're no longer employed. Then they go back and rehire someone else in their position. So right now, at this time, we don't have no tribal members that are employed with the mill because of they're on standby right now to try to renew the mill. And not too long ago, a truck had pulled into our our store there in White Mesa. This truck was unmarked, and they were hauling ammonia. This individual parked the vehicle in the parking lot of our convenience store and went in and asked, "I am looking for White Mesa Mill." He did not know where White Mesa Mill was located at. And this individual that worked there stated, "What are you hauling?" He said, "I'm hauling ammonia, and this needs to be delivered to the White Mesa Mill." And this truck is not marked. It doesn't say, any kind of signs of, there was no labels. There was nothing. So this individual told him, "Well, you need to go up another 5 more miles, and it's on your left-hand side there." So, we're dealing with a lot of issues in our community. For myself, I'm trying to shut down the mill. I don't want no more radioactive stuff to be hauled to nearby our reservation.
Hello. My name is Sarah Fields, and I have lived mostly in Moab for the last 20 years, and I'm with Uranium Watch, which is mostly me, located in Moab, which is about 85 miles north of the mill. The whole southeastern part of Utah was historically one of the centers of uranium mining and milling, just like over in the Grants Mineral District in New Mexico. I just wanted to give a little, and I'm also with the Sierra Club Nuclear Free Campaign. I'd also like, for everyone, activist and individual involved in nuclear issues here in this room, there's a dozen other people or more who are out there who have not come here today. I'm also part of the Western Mining Action Network, and individuals and organizations who work on uranium mining and milling issues are loosely organized through the WMAN Uranium Caucus. And we have a listserv. It's been a very important way for us to talk to each other from South Dakota down to Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Colorado. Mostly I work on what's happening now. So the White Mesa Mill is on standby, but they're going through a license renewal process. A very important thing has happened over the last few years is that the price of uranium has gone down, 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 down. So since 2012, all the uranium mines in Utah have been closed down. Most of those mines are on Bureau of Land Management land. A mine complex is up near the community of LaSalle, where they vent radon a quarter of a mile from an elementary school. So one of my jobs is to keep those mines closed down. We have 2 EAs, environmental assessments through the Bureau of Land Management, that have been issued in draft form, and we're waiting for the final environmental assessments to be released, and we'll most likely challenge those in court. So you have community action, but you also have sometimes administrative and legal proceedings to stop or delay uranium mining and milling decisions. And the more money that we can force Energy Fuels Resources, which is a Canadian company that owns the mill, the better off we are. Clee, yes, has talked about the Canyon mine, which is on the south rim of the Grand Canyon. Energy Fuels has been developing that mine, but they had a hoist accident because the mining company used old equipment. They're trying to save money, and it is unlikely in the near future that they're going to continue development of that mine because the price of uranium is so low. But if the price of uranium goes up, not only will that mine be developed, the mines over on Mount Taylor, the Roca Honda mine, might be developed, and that is a serious threat to the community, from the potential workers who might work in that mine, and to the cultural resources and the water. So that's something for the community of New Mexico to watch out for. I think I will. So one thing I have a table out there, and if anybody wants to get on my email list, I don't send out a lot of email, but I do have a website, and I do a lot of research. I'm more a researcher. I deal with the regulatory agencies than I am a community organizer, though I'm learning, and coming here has been a very important, I guess, spiritual renewal for myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so now we're going to transition into a different type of talk. We have Chris Shuey, who's going to share some of his work, and then we have ample time for discussion. So if you heard some questions, or if you have some questions, we do have plenty of time to ask those at this after Chris is done with his presentation. And one thing I wanted to add is that yesterday I did a long talk for some of you who were not there, and we went through the whole state. So we went through the whole nuclear fuel chain that's present in New Mexico, and it's basically every part of the nuclear fuel chain, except for really we don't have reprocessing. I mean, I don't know, it's something they're working on in the southeast, and then also we don't have a nuclear reactor that, conventional nuclear reactor, what do you call it? Commercial nuclear reactor. We have research reactors, but we have pretty much everything here in our state. And so our, okay, we need some help with the AV. Chris, I'm sorry, Clee? So we need, okay. So we'll get this going here in a minute. But I wanted to see how many people in here are aware of uranium mining. How many of you know that we have uranium mining? So yeah, we have mostly everybody, great. So sometimes I do this presentation in different parts of the world, and a lot of people don't even have any idea of what uranium mining is. Okay, so we're we're having technical difficulties. Okay, so I'm going to ask someone who's in the audience who just walked in last. We don't have anyone presenting on the Grants Mineral Belt, and if I could ask Christine to just share some information from the MACE organization, and she is also a representative of the Laguna Acoma Coalition for a Safe Environment.
Thank you. One of the things that's happening in the, now that I've been called on, everything, all the information just slips right out of your mind. This is in the Ambrosia Lake area where they used to have uranium mills. When I was a little girl, my father worked in the uranium mills, and we lived in Blue Water, but that whole area had mills, tailings ponds. So there's a group in the MACE organization called the Blue Water Down Valley Association, who have been monitoring for years, starting with Johnny Head and Milton Head. Now their daughter is monitoring this area, along with residents in the area. But what they're doing is they're watching two plumes, poisonous plumes that are going to meet at some point in that area, and essentially that area has been poisoned. They can't use their well water, they can't irrigate crops, they can't take care of their animals, and at one point that was prime agricultural land. And when I say prime, remember we're in New Mexico, we're in an arid area, but that was good. You know, as long as you had water, you could grow things, you could water livestock, you could take care of yourself and your family. That place is abandoned. I'm talking about that area around Ambrosia Lake on down. It's between Ambrosia Lake and Milan. They don't have their own water anymore. They can't use the well, so they've tapped into grants. But that one of those plumes from the tailings pond is moving toward grants. Grants will be affected, and then the Pueblo of Laguna will be affected. Not Laguna, I'm sorry, Acoma, because they use that same water. So we're gradually And I have to say this, because we need to take responsibility for what has happened in the past as well. We have poisoned ourselves because we have allowed so many things to happen because we have remained uneducated and with our heads in the sand, and now we're crying out, help us. You know, but we have done this to ourselves, so we need to take some responsibility in this area. But those plumes are going to be joining. And I wish, go on the website, the MACE website, and see if there's anything current from the Blue Water Down Valley Association to see if they're, I know Candace, I can't remember Candace's last name, but Candace has been monitoring this. She's about 50 years old now, and there is nobody coming after her to do this. To do this work. So if there's any young people who really want to follow something that is going to be a tragic situation, Blue Water Down Valley Association is the place to be. And working with Candace, interestingly enough, she lives in Denver now, and her parents have moved from that area to the Zuni Canyon because you can't really live there if you don't have any water. And so there's literally no future, essentially no future there. So one of the things I wanted to say too in coming into the room today is how wonderful it is to see a mixture of ages. There is plenty of knowledge in this room from those of us who have lived through things for 60 years or more. It's good to see young faces that are interested, but I really want to encourage you to, somebody hook up with Candace in Denver through the Blue Water Down Valley Association so that you can continue this work, because there's no there's a legacy, but there's no ancestry to help continue this work there. But it is so important because of the issues that are happening now. They're working closely with the Environmental Protection Agency and trying to be good stewards of the land and to monitor and to report and record information that is happening. But it's just not, we just need more help, more people power. And one of the things is, we talk about all of the agencies. Everything centers on us and what kind of work that we do. So never consider yourself unimportant because we are essential. Human beings are essential to this work, and there's so much power in these connected organizations, and I really value that.
Thank you, Christine. So Christine Lowry has worked on these issues for a very, very long time, and we're so grateful that you're here with the Laguna Acoma Coalition for a Safe Environment. And if folks want more information, will you be around? Okay, great. So we're just kind of fixing a quick little technical issue. We appreciate any technical prayers you want to send up here.
I apologize. We actually tried this out earlier, and we're just not getting a connection with the projector up there. So, again, my name is Chris Shuey, and I've been at Southwest Research and Information Center since 1981, and have had the privilege of working with communities on the Navajo Nation largely since about 78, 79, almost 40 years. And I got that started when I was actually a journalist, a reporter, and had the opportunity to speak with many of the women up in the Red Valley and Cove area who had, by the mid to late 70s, lost their husbands to lung cancer and a variety of respiratory diseases, non-malignant respiratory diseases. And that was the first attempt to get compensation for the former miners and their families. The Navajo miners were an important subset of all the Colorado Plateau underground uranium miners because they were largely a non-smoking population. At the same time, we were busy, I was living down in the Phoenix area, and we were busy trying to stop the construction of the Palo Verde nuclear generating station. We were only partially successful at that time. It was planned to be 5 units. It only became 3. So that was kind of a little bit of a win, but it has remained now one of the operating nuclear complexes in the United States. So as time has gone on, I've kind of transitioned into environmental health research. And I've been here at UNM collaborating with folks at the Health Sciences Center through the Community Environmental Health Program headed by Dr. Johnny Lewis, and then other folks in the College of Pharmacy, Dr. Matt Campen and others who work on the toxicology of exposures to toxicants in the environment. Recently, we've also been working on here on main campus, just a couple of buildings away, with folks in chemistry, in earth and planetary science, and civil engineering on the environmental effects of abandoned mines. And what we're trying to do is bring together these disciplines, but we don't do it in a vacuum. Because we spend so much time in the communities, we've learned a lot about how exposures take place. But most important, we've had the opportunity to engage with citizens and community members and have helped really bring those folks and their traditional ecological knowledge, indigenous knowledge into the research process. So that not just the questions are derived from the community, but the responses are derived from the community. As a consequence of that, we've discovered a lot of things about uranium waste, uranium mine waste, that I thought I would briefly share with you today. There are, as Clee mentioned, the West is full of abandoned hard rock mines, of which uranium is just one of many kinds, but there's more than 10,000 abandoned uranium mines throughout the West. He mentioned places in the Black Hills in South Dakota, here on Navajo and Laguna, throughout really the West. You remember a couple years ago, a few years back, the Gold King mine release, which was about 3 million gallons of kind of orangish, yucky stuff that came out of a mine up in the San Juan Mountains north of Durango, and flowed down through the Animas rivers and the San Juan rivers, affecting a lot of people along the way. It was a tremendous insult to the environment, and especially to the irrigators on the Navajo Nation who had depended upon those flows for irrigation for their crops along the San Juan in the portion of Navajo that stretches from just east of Shiprock all the way over to almost Glen Canyon. So one minute to cover this. Anyway, I just wanted to remind you that in 1979 there was the Church Rock Uranium Mill Tailings Dam break, which remains the largest release of radioactive waste by volume in the history of the United States, and now ranks probably below Fukushima and Chernobyl in the terms of the amount of radiation that was released. It was 33 times bigger in volume than the Gold King mine release. It affected more than 24 communities up and down the Puerco River, which is a tributary to the Little Colorado River down by Holbrook, Arizona. It was also at a time when the mines in the Church Rock area northeast of Gallup were discharging up to 5,200 gallons a minute of contaminated mine water. So you had this 30-year history of assaults on the water supply of a lot of the Navajo communities in that area. The difference was, of course, in 1979, there weren't any attorney generals who came out. There weren't any governors who expressed sorrow. There weren't EPA administrators who said squat about it, really. And it disappeared into history, but recently we have discovered that the effects of that particular accident and the chronic loading of the uranium mine discharges on the stream system has probably affected water quality in wells along the river down in the Sanders, Arizona area. My colleague, Tommy Rock, over at NAU is working on his PhD. Also works with Leona and Clee and a number of other folks. We teamed up to work with the Sanders community to understand how the state of Arizona and the US EPA could have allowed people to be drinking uranium-contaminated water in wells that served a Navajo community called Park Estates in Sanders and the Sanders School, which has about 800 children. These exposures have been chronic over time. The good news was that about a year later, we were able, in April of last year, able to get the Navajo Tribal Utility Authority to hook up those folks' community system and get them off of contaminated water. This was not just a little bit of contamination. This was gross uranium contamination of their supposedly safe drinking water public water system that the regulatory agencies allowed to happen without really telling the people, and we were the first to come and tell the folks what they had been drinking for a long period of time. In public health, the first thing you do is try to stop the exposure, so we stopped the exposure. But the ultimate solution to the problem is cleaning up the groundwater that's been contaminated by the past uranium mine discharges. We see that as one of the next steps in a large Superfund project. I would just tell you that if you have uranium waste in your backyard, whether it's in White Mesa, Grants, anywhere on Navajo, Laguna, this stuff is bad for you. It's replete with a wide range of heavy metals plus the radioactive materials. Uranium is both, and so it's a double whammy. And folks in the tribal communities have lived with this for generations. This started in 1942, and we are just now getting around to understanding the health effects over time. So what we've learned is that the closer you live to uranium mine waste, and the more activities you had in your lifetime to come in contact with those wastes, substantially increased your risk of hypertension, meaning high blood pressure, RAP, and kidney disease and autoimmunity. And we backed this up and found in biological sampling the same conditions. So it's not safe to live near uranium mines. We've had to spend several $1 million to generate proof, scientific proof of this problem, right? It's sad that those things happen, but they do, and this is the universe that we live in, where mines and contaminants are not guilty until proven innocent. They're innocent until proven guilty. And we're hoping that at some point here over the next generation, we're working with a lot of young people in our research programs now, for them to be the next set of scientists. We're hoping that this is the beginning of the era of cleanup and no more mining.
Can we get this mic on? Okay, so first of all, I want to say I apologize to Chris because we did do the tech, we did run through it, but I have a very scary announcement for all the other presenters out there. If you have a video or a PowerPoint, we are trying to work on this problem right now, and we'll work on it over lunch, and we will do our best to get this projector back up and running. But just in case, be prepared to do a talk only. So I know you worked really hard on your presentations. I know you all did. And I asked everyone to email them to me and to put them on a jump drive, so I was hoping that, I would have everything on my computer so we wouldn't have to switch out. But I really do apologize to just to be prepared. But moving forward, so right now we do have some time to do discussion and Q&A. And so We have several people here on the panel and also in the audience, and I want to just give I want to say thank you very much to Christine, because you kind of put her on the spot there, but I'm really happy she was able to speak, because there is we call it the Grants Mineral Belt, and I think there's the Uravan Mineral Belt up toward where Sarah's at, and some of these things that we're talking about, there are actions people can take to get involved. So I know some of you probably have some questions. If the panelists would share the wired mic, and then I'll run this one around the room. So we'll take some questions from all of you, and then also we would like to hear, we are so busy focusing on all the bad things that are happening, we're sharing all the problems, but we really want to be action and solution oriented in our work. And so I'm going to ask the panelists, when you do give a response, to remember, how do people get involved? How do they support? Is there a current campaign? Is there things people can do? Are there things people can do in their own homes and communities that will aid in what you all are doing? Okay, moving forward, does anyone have a question? Anybody have any questions? Okay, Diane, and then anyone, I'll take a couple hands right now. Okay, so we got it, because it's for the live stream, and then it's also being recorded, so we need to use the mic. And do you have a question, Karen, after Diane? Okay, so who's got the next question after Diane? Okay, thanks, Don.
I wanted Yolanda to tell more about, I fight so-called low-level waste, and I learned that it's not very protective how they dump it, but in order to make it even cheaper, they wanted to send it to your mine and run it through, to your mill, and run it through so that they could dump it in an even less protective way. And I wonder if you know if there's any other nuclear waste coming into the mill at this point, or what the status is of that, or if we've prevented that, if you know about that.
Well, okay. Well, right now, at this moment, like I said, it's on a standby. But what they're trying to do is they want to haul the Grand Canyon mining to the mill, and Cameron mining to White Mesa Mill as well, and the mining that is from to White Mesa.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something. There's a proposal to haul waste from the Gore, Oklahoma conversion facility with the cleanup from there. Material is coming from Canada, and material is coming from the Metropolis conversion facility, and they call it alternate feed. The NRC redefined ore to be any kind of uranium-bearing waste that's processed at the mill. But what's important, too, is that Energy Fuels wants to receive all the waste from the cleanup of the uranium mines in the Navajo Nation, and if there's any legislation to clean up other mine waste, and they would get paid to receive this, and it would mean an expansion of the mill, and when the mill expands, if they build a new tailings impoundment, that would destroy amazing archaeological resources at the site. I'm talking about kivas and human habitations that you can't see from the surface, and they previously destroyed these precious archaeological sites, and they'll continue to do that if the mill continues to expand. So even though we want these sites in the Navajo Nation and elsewhere to be cleaned up, we don't want the cleanup materials to go to the mill. No, a big difference, okay, the The White Mesa Mill is regulated by the State of Utah Division of Waste Management and Radiation Control. It's an NRC agreement state. The mills, any mill in New Mexico is regulated by the NRC, but Colorado, Washington, and Utah are agreement states, and Wyoming has applied for agreement state status. The mines are regulated by state mining regulatory agencies, and if they're on federal lands, BLM, or the Forest Service, they're regulated by the, they come under the National Environmental Protection Act, NEPA, and are also regulated by the federal government.
I just want to say it's a little outrage amongst all the outrages of the lack of caring by government and industry. But boiling water does nothing to make the water more helpful for drinking. And my question was, what's happening with the Blue Castle proposal?
The Blue Castle, I guess you're talking about the proposed nuclear reactor near Green River. As far as I can tell, that is never going to happen. The company has never, they proposed a reactor next to Green River, which is on the Green River, the major tributary to the Colorado River. The Native American tribes in the lower Colorado have been active in, we made connections between Moab and the community down there. So the company got water, but through the Utah Division of Water Rights, but they didn't have enough money to pay for the lease of the water, so they are 2 years behind in paying for those leases. They've never had the money to put together an early site permit. So I believe it's dead, but we keep track of it.
All right, we have another question here.
The UMTRA, the law that I talked about earlier, the Milling Tailings Act, was that 79, I think it was passed? 78. In 78, so there is cleanup. I think there's like 50 mills total throughout the U.S. 24 of them were abandoned. But that law has resolved a lot of those issues. But specifically, you're talking about rare metals. And if you watch, I made a VR video out there. I have an interview with one of my relatives who used to live in the community that was adjacent, literally. If you drive on that road from Tuba City North to Kayenta, to this day, you can just look off to the right. It's about 15, 20 miles north of Tuba City, and you'll see the rare metals Tuba City Mill site. And they called that town Rare Metals because that was the name of the corporation. But there were families who used to live there, and those houses were made from contaminated materials. To this day, you can see the trees where my aunt says birds used to just fall out of the trees. With families who lived there. I mean, every family that you talk to in Tuba City had some relative who lived there and who had some impact of exposure. But that mill site, when we talk about cleanup, I would say that the cleanup standard is really concerning. There's no consistent standard for cleanup when we look at these sites. They do characterization, and I think Chris could talk a little bit more about this, but there is migration. When Yolanda was talking about groundwater contamination, we're talking about migration of these plumes of radioactive pollution. There is that threat in the Tuba City area right now that's coming from it, because it's just asphalt that's covering millions of tons of radioactive material right now, and that's what they call cleanup. And that's actually, right now, we're dealing with CERCLA, I didn't talk about earlier, the Comprehensive Environmental Response and Liability Act of 1980, which is a Superfund law, which sort of is designed to address these toxic sites, but they have very specific parameters or qualifications, and a lot of it's based upon population density. But in rural, communities, much of our indigenous communities are very rural, we don't get that prioritization because it's based upon primarily population density. It's very rare that Superfund sites like Laguna here, the Jack Pile, and so forth are designated only if they're extremely problematic and people make a lot of noise and precipitate a crisis, so that it does precipitate cleanup. The Navajo Nation has the 5-year cleanup plan, which is initiated by Henry Waxman, and this is a testimony to actually the power of artistry and the power of artists. Return to Navajo Boy was the key. Sort of that documentary was a key factor in triggering the hearings and the congressional action to implement the Navajo Nation 5-year cleanup plan. But even that 5-year cleanup plan is problematic, because out of the 523 or so abandoned uranium mines, which that's actually the claims, there are over 1,000, potentially more, specific sites, and that doesn't even address the prospects, which in many cases are just as radioactive. In impacting our communities, just in the Cameron area alone, which the cleanup from Cameron, Energy Fuels right now is talking about transporting the cleanup material to White Mesa Mill, which we don't want. There's no consent, right? No consultation with the Ute Mountain Ute community. There's no consultation or consent for the communities down the road. But part of the issue there is that there's over 100 abandoned uranium mines just in the Cameron region alone, and right now the EPA has slated 19, I think, for priority cleanup. It's because they found the responsible parties. In many cases, these corporations have changed hands so many times you can't figure out who did what. But we have one site also that's owned by Babbitt Ranches, so it's on private land, called Section 9, which is extremely toxic site. It's 1,000 feet away from the Colorado River, Little Colorado River, so it's continuing to contaminate that site. But we went in there recently with Tommy Rock, who actually just recently got his PhD. So he's not. Well, no, he got his. He just defended it. Yeah, he defended his thesis last week. So so he just got that. We were there. So, but I'll wrap this up because Section 9 is a critical example of the problems that we face in a range of different communities, because there are sites just like Section 9, but it comprises about almost 40 acres between 3 mines. And there was a site called the Upgrader site that was part of it, which essentially was a pre-processing plant, not quite a mill, not quite a mine. But we went there recently with Tommy and a crew of folks, and we had heard reports that the USGS, when they went there, their Geiger counters they went off the charts. The needles just went up and they couldn't go higher. Yeah, Section 9 site. And so, but that site, if you go there to this day, there are signs that say danger, do not enter, and Denepizod, Navajo language, but they're right in the midst of the piles. You can go into this area. If you don't have special equipment, you don't know anything is happening. But there are a range of stories like this plaguing not only the Diné communities, but New Mexico and beyond. So just to say that, yes, the mills have been addressed to some degree, but the standards right now are problematic because there's no consistent standard that's being applied. In many cases, as Chris has said, and you could talk more about this, it amounts to toxic landscaping.
So actually, we do have only a few more minutes of this panel, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Chris, but just to kind of focus what you guys are saying, what can we do about all these things? Writing letters to Congress, getting resolutions passed. I mean, we can keep talking about the problem all day. What do we do to work towards solutions? What will help you, Chris? I know there's always this health bill that's introduced in the state of New Mexico that never gets passed. I don't know if that's if that's even a good solution to try to push bills in the legislature with the clean up the mines thing. We said it's on hold. How can we I know I interrupted you, Chris, so I'm just going to let you go. Did you want to comment on, continue commenting on this?
Well,
just a couple of things. We are now roughly 25 years into the cleanup of these uranium mill tailings piles under the UMTRA law from '78, and the covers are already failing. They were supposed to be designed to last for up to 1,000 years, and in no case less than 200, and there's already being efforts to fix them. They're developing cracks, they're releasing radon. So the mill tailings problem was kind of dealt with for a while, and now it's still a problem. It's becoming more of a problem. The mine waste is a huge problem that's going to take multiple generations. What to do about it, you know, there's thousands of things that we can do in little steps, but we have to have a long view. We have to have a multi-generational view, because so many of these communities, especially on native lands, people don't move away from the hazard. They're tied to the land, and that those chronic exposures are affecting not just the older people, but the younger people too. And so that's why we're trying to bring a lot of younger tribal people into some of the STEM science courses, while allowing them to communicate back to people that are much older and don't know some of the history of their communities, because that history explains exposure. And exposure is so important to ascertain in all of these sites. There's not enough money around to completely study all the health problems, and there's certainly not enough money to do all the cleanup. On Navajo, there have been 3 major settlements with either private parties or government agencies to the tune of almost $1.5 billion, $1.4, $1.5 billion, and that's going to address only about 40% of the abandoned mines. And those are the abandoned mines that have been identified, not the more difficult, the additional 1,000 mine features. So what to do is to take the long-term look, educate each generation that comes up. That's why we like people like Eileen. She is educating the next generations that are coming up. You can advocate to your Congress people. You know, one of the advantages of the Clean Up the Mines approach is to raise awareness that we really don't have a statute at the federal level that is oriented specifically to cleaning up the abandoned uranium mine issue, okay? CERCLA, or the Superfund law, is the only thing that EPA and the states use to really address some of these sites, and it is inadequate. It was never intended for large volume, big sites like the mine sites. And importantly, when you're working with communities on these issues, and EPA comes and or the companies come and tell you what they're going to do under CERCLA, keep in mind that when it comes down to making decisions, that are only 2 people, there's only 2 entities that count: the EPA, or the regulatory agency, and the responsible party. You can live in that community all your lives, your generations with you, being exposed, and you don't have a seat at that table. Don't believe for a second that perfunctory public engagement programs, you know, EPA comes out and puts on dog and pony shows. That does not get you a seat at the table to negotiate the solution to these cleanups. The closest that we can come is on the Navajo Nation. There's been the Dene Uranium Remediation Advisory Commission was approved by the Navajo Council last year or the year before. There are people from the communities who are going to sit on that commission, and for the first time, some of the Navajo people themselves who have been affected will put their stamp on policy related to what to do with these wastes. And I can almost assure you that they're not going to be real down with shipping Cameron mine waste to White Mesa. The thought is that they're going to look at how Navajo Nation is going to handle this in ways that do not continue to affect the Navajo communities, but control the waste and keep them isolated for the thousands of years that it's necessary.
Thank you, Chris. So I think a lot of the things you guys are hearing, the audience, I don't know if this is maybe the first time or you already know this issue well. I know with the Clean Up the Mines work, we do need congressional support when it does go into, when we do get the bill introduced, no matter how many years it takes. But it's never too early to educate our elected officials. And I hear that the best way is to do handwritten letters. So I would encourage all of you here today to take the opportunity to hear some of these things that you're learning about. There's no law or funding to clean up abandoned mines. The coverings to the tailings and all these other things are tracking. And we're going to hear more about radiation emissions when we talk about the nuclear reactors, the aging reactors, and those kinds of things. But right now, I just want to do a time check. It's basically time for a lunch break, but I think because we had this huge technical fiasco, we're going to do one more question. I know Diane had a question, and then we're going to wrap up this session. And at the end of this question, I don't know who it's directed at, but I would like to hear from each of the panelists one final thought to end and to give the audience after we hear the question. And it doesn't have to be in response to the question, but we just would like to hear some final words from each of the panelists. So,
Thanks. What I was talking, it sounds to me like when they're talking about cleaning up mines and sending waste to White Mesa or other mill areas, that it's a way to like pretend they're cleaning up. And so the thing I wanted to offer support and work together on is after that uranium goes into the nuclear reactors and it splits and it gets more radioactive and it has a whole bunch of hundreds of more radionuclides in it, then they want to send it back to the mill that was only intended to process uranium and then normal decay products from uranium, but it would bring in all the other stuff like cesium and strontium and plutonium and iodines that wouldn't normally be in the front end, and that would come back to the mill, making it, I would say, probably, I don't know how much worse, but certainly much worse. And so I fight those dumps, and I want to work with you on preventing that if that's still a threat.
So great, thanks. There wasn't really a question in there, but I think it's a good segue into Diane's offering support. Diane works with NEARS, and we also have Greta Beyond Nuclear. And so I think having these national organizations represented here, and then we have regional, of course, things coming out from Flagstaff and Sarah and Yolanda have traveled from the Four Corners area. So I'm just gonna go down the table. I'm actually going to start this way and let the ladies have the last word, because that's usually the one that sticks, and so we want to hear from them. No, but we have Chris as Danielle, so not going to do that. We as women should have the last word.
The abandoned mine problem is huge. It's going to take perseverance in whatever methods, through legislation, through regulatory involvement, especially through the action of committees. It's still reprehensible to me that we are measuring these sub-micron nanoparticles coming off these mines, and people are exposed to them on a daily basis. They're already exhibiting toxicity in laboratory mice, and I can't imagine what it's done to people who are going around. And as much as I've been privileged to work with folks, I don't live in those communities, and so I'm not as directly affected as they are. So whenever you have an opportunity to support these communities directly through funds or through advocacy, please do. They desperately need the help, and we can certainly put you in the direction of those folks that can make it.
The climate justice movement needs to come to categorically assert that
Uh, There are a number of tables out there. I have some information from Uranium Watch and a sign-up sheet. If you put your name on there, I will put you on my email list. I don't send a lot of emails, but I will be putting out any action alerts and information. If you have a chance to go to law school, go to law school. Become the movement relies on some attorneys in New Mexico and Colorado, but we need more legal support. Become a scientist and put your ideas and your intelligence and your research efforts into this issue. So Uranium Watch out there, just put your name down, and the same goes for Hall No. And we communicate with each other. We're friends. And come and talk to me. Thank you. And talk to Yolanda.
I put some sheets out there on Sarah's table, so you guys are more welcome to get those and read what we have been doing during the year, fiscal year. My thing is, I would like to shut the mill down because I do not want no more hauling, because if they pass their license, then if they expand the mill, then it's gonna just be only one step away from our reservation. And that's not something that I want. I want it to shut down. So if you guys would, write letters to the NRC board, to help me out on my behalf of our reservation, that would, I'm really thankful for you guys to do that. And thank you for having me here.
Okay, and that concludes our uranium panel. This was the front end of the nuclear fuel chain, and we got a lot more to go all day. We've cut a little bit into lunch, but we have a food truck right outside the door, and I think we still have plenty of snacks outside. But please, we'll be here again starting promptly at 1:30. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Yolanda. That's great. And I'm so sorry for all this. I mean, we're just killing our land.
Yeah, we are.
I'm going to write a letter, but I'd like to get a little more info maybe on maybe who specifically, if you have any contacts.
I think everything's on Sarah's table.
Okay,
yeah.
I'll check it out then.
Uranium Watch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where's the people with the lockpicks? Huh?